our in-house historian, Max Alvarez. Max? You there, Max?
Oh, yes, I am here. I am here. So we are set to go. All right.
I lost Max. Oh, no.
Sorry, Lee. Well, this movie does deal with technical problems in show business, so I thought that was
Well, you did that on purpose.
it was all planned and rehearsed, ladies and gentlemen. Great to be back for what is a pretty important anniversary, because April 10th coming up is the 70th anniversary of the release of Singin' in the Rain, which has frequently been classified as the greatest of all film musicals. Although our Gary Palmucci convincingly argued in favor of Vincent Minnelli's The Bandwagon when he and I discussed that equally great musical almost 2 years ago for New Plaza Online. There was a book written on producer Arthur Freed, and it quoted the two writers of the film Singin' in the Rain, Betty Comden and Adolph Green. And I don't know whether this is Betty or Adolph talking, but in that book they were quoted as saying, several years after the film Singin' in the Rain was released, or no, this is in the book, Betty Comden and Adolph Green were in Paris, and they reported suddenly a small lithe figure came sliding across us like a hockey player, zooming over the ice. It was Francois Truffaut, who we've spoken about recently at New Plaza. It's Francois Truffaut himself. And he was breathless and awestruck at meeting the authors of what in France was known as Chantons sous la pluie, Singing in the Rain. In total disbelief, we heard him go on to say through his interpreter that he has seen the film many, many times, knew every frame of it, felt it was a classic, and that he and Alain Resnais, famous for Last Year at Marienbad and other great artistic French films, among others, went to see it regularly at a little theater called the Pagode, which is still in Paris, showing specialized films, where it was even at that moment in the middle of a several-month run. This talks about the international appeal of Singin' in the Rain, a genre that is not always exportable. Musicals historically didn't usually do as well because of the language barrier. Singin' in the Rain obviously transcended that. I was, when I first saw Singin' in the Rain, it was a mere 20 years old, being projected in 16 millimeter in a fairly empty room at the Milwaukee Art Museum. But I immediately fell in love with the picture, not only for the extraordinary song and dance sequences and the glorious technicolor, but for its penetrating sense of humor and unusual awareness of motion picture history. But the best film musicals from the old studio era frequently suffer from underdeveloped, hokey, and just plain superficial storylines, which serve as mere excuses for people to break into singing and dancing. Singin' in the Rain is not one of those films. The screenplay is smart, even hip in its humor, its uses of cultural satire, lampooning the 1920s jazz age and Hollywood's traumatic transition from the silent to the talking picture. Hollywood was never very good about comprehending, much less preserving, its colorful past, but Singin' in the Rain was a rare breath of fresh historical air. There's a sense here that the movie makers actually get the subject matter, that they're not blinded by nostalgia for a bygone era. They're not afraid to poke fun at the eccentricities of the tango days of the 1920s and the naivete of the movie studios in the late 20s when sound technology was seen by many as merely a passing fancy. So right now, we're going to take a look at the original 1952 trailer for Singin' in the Rain. It runs 4 minutes. It's one of the longer trailers we've shown here. And while the focus is mostly on the musical numbers, you're going to note how it takes time, the trailer, it takes its time to show, for example, the scene where the head of the Monumental Pictures studio, Millard Mitchell, is explaining the technical challenges they are now facing at the studio. Let's take a look at the film we are honoring today, which is about to turn 70, Singin' in the Rain. Here's the original trailer.
a glorious feeling. We're happy again. We'll walk down the lane with a happy refrain and singing, just singing in the rain.
Hold it, Dexter. Well, Mr. Simpson, we're really rolling.
Yeah, well, you can stop rolling at once.
Huh?
Don, Lena.
All right, everybody, save it.
Save it. Tell them to go home. We're shutting down for a few weeks.
What?
Well, don't just stand there. Tell them.
Everybody go home until further notice. What is this?
Yeah, what's the matter, R.F.?
The jazz singer. That's what's the matter. The jazz singer.
Oh, my darling little mammy. Now, little mammy. My little baby.
No, this is no joke, Cosmo. It's a sensation. The public is screaming for more.
More what?
Talking pictures. Talking pictures.
Oh, it's just a freak.
Yeah, what a freak. We should have such a freak at this studio. I told you talking pictures were a menace, but no one would listen to me. Don, we're going to put our best feet forward. We're going to make the dueling cavalier into a talking picture.
Beautiful girl, you're a lovely picture. You were meant for me.
All I do is dream of you the whole night through.
You're all my lucky charms. I'm lucky in your eyes.
Fit as a fiddle, ready for love. I can jump over the moon up above. Fit as a fiddle and ready for love.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain.
Make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We've talked the whole night through.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. Broadway rhythm, it's got me. Everybody dance. Broadway rhythm, it's got me. Everybody dance.
When I hear that happy beat, feel like dancing down the street.
So today we're going to talk about a little bit about the production background of Singing in the Rain. Dan Cahill will be joining me in a little while to talk about the visual look of the picture. We'll kick around some more data on the technical side of the film and also the inspirations of Singing in the Rain, which is heavily inspired by the music, mostly from the screenwriting or songwriting team of Arthur Freed and Nacio Herb Brown. Freed, of course, being the producer of Singing in the Rain. In watching the film for the umpteenth time the other night, the laughs that I always remembered were still there, even in my living room. I remember the Hollywood party early on in the scene and the ridiculous tango dancing between a very short man and a very tall woman, and the very eccentric silent film star who almost has a spider-like costume on her. Lena Lamont getting cake in her face from Kathy still gets a big laugh. Lena's, once they're realizing they're going to have to make the Dueling Cavalier as a talkie or as a musical, saying, well, of course we talk, doesn't everybody? In her appalling voice that leaves the studio terrified. Kathleen Freeman as Lena Lamont's diction coach, and Lena famously responding to certain dialogue cues, "I can't stand him." Douglas Fowley as the suffering director trying to make sense of sound technology. The clip or the sequence where they're remaking the film as a talkie and the camera is in a glass booth and they're trying to decide where to put the damn microphone to pick up Lena's voice, is very accurate for the challenges Hollywood was facing at the time. And I once gave a short speech at my speakers club in Midtown Manhattan about Singin' in the Rain, why it's such an essential movie to see. And these were mostly business people who had not seen the film. They were not movie geeks like me. And I showed that clip of the recording issues during that take with the Lena and Don, and how the head of the studio pulls the wire and knocks Lena off the bench. Huge laugh at the Bar Association, absolutely huge. And in the film, every time Jean Hagen is on screen, I found myself laughing uncontrollably. She is so brilliant in the role of Lena Lamont. And we'll talk more about her and the other great performers. So it starts with music, and producer Arthur Freed and his writing partner Nacio Herb Brown had met and started working together in 1921. They are going to become songwriters at the MGM studio starting the late 1920s. The Broadway Melody, which won the Academy Award for reasons which still escape me in 1929, was a huge hit for the studio, and the studio is going to put them under contract as their exclusive songwriters. Now, the Betty Comden and Adolph Green screenwriting team knew that they had to come up with a project to fit the Arthur Freed songs, the Freed Brown score. And they wanted a project that was faithful to the era in which the songs were written. So they started thinking about the period when those songs were written, which was when the silent movie was dying off and the talkies were traumatizing Hollywood. They were particularly inspired by the sad case of the silent screen lover John Gilbert. He was such a massive box office attraction during the silent years. And then when the talkies arrived, well, it's a question of what happens next. There was a film that Gilbert made, a notorious film that still has not been put out on DVD, His Glorious Night from 1929, which showed Gilbert's limitations. Either it shows his limitations as an actor in sound pictures, or it shows the incompetence of the director of that film, which was a very good actor named Lionel Barrymore. He just didn't have any business directing it. In any case, His Glorious Night was such a disaster. It got laughed at previews and when it was shown in the cinema. There were rumors that Louis B. Mayer was trying to wreck Gilbert's career by messing with the soundtrack, but then others argue about this. Author Mick LaSalle, in a book he wrote called Dangerous Men, Pre-Code Hollywood and the Birth of the Modern Man, describes this John Gilbert disaster, His Glorious Night, as Hollywood's Zapruder film. In other words, it was Hollywood's equivalent to the film that showed the Kennedy assassination, where historians argue with each other as to what really happened. Comden and Green to come up with a narrative about silent stars who have to live with the horror of sound technology. Walter Plunkett, the costume designer, designed more than 500 costumes for the principals and the bit players. He entered the business at the height of the flapper era. And Plunkett said, many of Jean Hagen's costumes as Lena Lamont are, as nearly as I can remember, duplicates of some of the costumes I did in all seriousness for the silent film star Lillian Tashman. And she was the epitome of chic at that time. Rehearsals for Singin' in the Rain began in April of 1951. Dan is going to tell us more about Debbie Reynolds and her evolution as a song and dance performer. But she began working on the tap dancing numbers with a man named Ernie Flatt. Stanley Donen, the co-director with Gene Kelly, worked with Kelly's dance assistant Carol Haney on staging all of the musical numbers. The three of them worked together. The film was in production for 5 months, wrapping in November of 1951. Remarkably long time for a Hollywood production. And it ended up costing, in today's currency, over $27 million, $2.5 million at the time, but it was a massive hit, grossing in what today would be over $82 million. The censors had issues with some of the script, and there was a book written on the Freed unit that got into some of the archives. There, at the Hollywood party early on, we see Donald O'Connor's Cosmo. He's hitting on a young woman at the party. And originally, the dialogue was the young woman says to Cosmo, "Oh, Mr. Brown, could you really get me into movies?" And the Donald O'Connor character says, "I should think so." And the girl says, "Really?" And Cosmo says, "There are ways." And she says, "Oh, what would I have to do?" Well, that last line had to go. That was cut. And there's also a line of Donald O'Connor's that had to be cleaned up for the film. Originally, it was, he's saying this to Gene Kelly's character after the Debbie Reynolds character has a falling out with him at the party in the beginning. Donald O'Connor's character said to Gene Kelly originally, "She's the first dame who said no since you were 4. They had to finesse that a bit to get past the censors. The censors wrote, "Good taste will be essential in handling this scene where Lena is wired for sound," where the microphone is placed in her cleavage. And originally in the scene where Donald O'Connor, this is after the Good Morning number, when Donald O'Connor's Cosmo character comes up with the brilliant idea of lip syncing, having Lena lip sync to Kathy, doing the actual singing for the Dancing Cavalier. And you see Cosmo lip syncing to Kathy singing behind him. Originally, Cosmo says to the Don character, "Well, convincing?" And Gene Kelly's Don was to have originally replied, "Enchanting. What are you doing later?" No, censors would not allow that. And finally, the censors had to say to the producers, "We wish to remind you that we cannot approve photographing women in their underwear. Please bear this in mind when Don runs through the dressing room." Then we have the music that inspired the actual production numbers, taken from the catalog that Arthur Freed and Brown contributed to the MGM library. Some of the songs in question, "You Were Meant for Me" and "Broadway Melody" first were performed in that Best Picture of 1929, The Broadway Melody by Charles King. "You Are My Lucky Star," which Kelly sings at the end, although there originally was a version of it sung by Debbie Reynolds that got cut out of the film. That was originally sung by Eleanor Powell in Broadway Melody of 1936. "Good Morning" was originally sung by Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland in Babes in Arms in 1939. "Would You," which is the song the Kathy character is dubbing for the musical remake of The Dueling Cavalier. Jeanette MacDonald sang that in San Francisco in 1936. There's that montage of the talkie revolution where you see a lot of optical effects of kick lines and people dressed as college students singing all kinds of crazy late 20s songs. Some of those were taken from films like Going Hollywood, the song Temptation. There was I've Got a Feeling You're Foolin', which also came from Broadway Melody of 1936, and so on. The song that we see from the musical number being filmed, Beautiful Girl, originally was sung by Bing Crosby in an MGM film, Going Hollywood, from the early 30s. All I Do Is Dream of You was first performed in a Joan Crawford melodrama, a pre-code film from 1934 called Sadie McKee. Broadway Rhythm was performed in Broadway Melody of 1936, and Singin' in the Rain, the song that gave the film its title, was first performed by Ukulele Ike in the MGM All-Star Review, Hollywood Review of 1929. And there were a few others that were otherwise inspired. The title song of Gene Kelly singing in the rain was filmed in a day and a half on MGM's East Side Street of the backlot. The major figure in the MGM Arthur Freed musical unit, Roger Edens, because Gene Kelly was not fond of musical comedy stars who just broke into song in musicals. He suggested that Kelly begin his song with doody doo doo, doody doody doo doo, just to get the audience ready for him to begin singing. Kelly had them dig holes in the street set to accumulate the rainwater for the big number, to give me puddles which I would use for certain steps in my dance routine, to quote Kelly. Here's another one of our Hollywood secrets. In an interview from a woman who was not known for making things up, Gwen Verdon said that she dubbed Gene Kelly's tap sounds in the Singin' in the Rain number. She tap danced in a tray of water. Carol Haney, the choreographer, also was rumored to have dubbed some of the tapping sounds in that number and perhaps others. Here's a piece of trivia for you, which is unbelievable. Where we have Debbie Reynolds' Kathy character dubbing Lena Lamont's dialogue in a very beautiful voice, that's not Debbie Reynolds' voice. That's Jean Hagen's voice, the actress who plays Lena Lamont. She had a very beautiful speaking voice that we don't get a sense of in this film. And the ultimate irony is that even though Debbie Reynolds performs most of her songs, for the Would You song that we see her dubbing on the soundstage, that was actually dubbed by Betty Royce. And the incredible Make 'em Laugh number of Donald O'Connor, those of you with trained ears will recognize that as plagiarized from Cole Porter's Be a Clown, which had been written for The Pirate in 1948. We see some passive aggression on co-director Stanley Donen's part. The Beautiful Girl number, in which we see these incredible a fashion show satirizing 1920s women's fashions as Jimmy Thompson is singing the song. It ends with a high angle shot of Thompson and the women models forming a kaleidoscopic pattern, clearly modeled after Busby Berkeley. Stanley Donen hated Busby Berkeley's choreography and apparently did that as a bit of a sarcastic jab at Berkeley. The Broadway ballet that is 15 minutes on the screen cost what today would have been over $6.5 million. And Gene Kelly, Stanley Donen, and Carol Haney worked on it together. Sid Charisse worked very closely with Carol Haney on her ballet dancing. And the ballet was rehearsed for a month. And it took a month and 2 weeks to actually film. So there's so much more to talk about, especially the technical side of things, but I think this would be a good time to bring our resident visual expert in, filmmaker Dan Cahill, who's going to discuss the look of this glorious 3-strip Technicolor movie and the impact it makes on us. Welcome back, Dan.
Hi, Max, and welcome to everyone out there in Zoom land. I always acknowledge the contribution of the cinematographer. In this case, it's a chap named Harold Rawson, who was very well known in Hollywood. I think he had 150 credits over a very long career, but what's most important, perhaps, well, he, for one thing, other films that he shot were, The Wizard of Oz, and one of my favorites, The Asphalt Jungle, one of the classical film noir. But he also was working as a cinematographer in Hollywood during this all-important transition from silent to sound. So he came bringing a lot of experience putting this all together. And now I'm going to try and get to my all-important PowerPoint so that I can show you what I had to show you today. One more. Okay, here we are with everybody's favorite musical. And the first frame I want to show you is one of my favorites, Monumental Pictures. This frame embodies the expression Poverty Row, which came into Hollywood in the 20s. It doesn't describe a specific place, but the studios that were operating on very low budgets. And I just love this shot. Clearly the gate needs painting. The gardening is inferior. And I even love the forlorn telephone pole sticking up on the right side of the frame. So this tells you what kind of place they're working in. Here is a shot of Gene, which Max used in his lecture on Wednesday. And I realized a couple of days ago, I was chatting with our colleague, Gary Palmucci, and we were at the New Plaza Cinema West End Theater on 86th Street, just to remind you all. And I asked him, what, if anything, do you know about Gene Kelly's personal life? I didn't know much. And thankfully, there are no stories of his abusing people, but apparently he was never very happy with the work product. He always kept pushing people harder and harder. And so this shows him in sort of a somber mood. So it's my way of saying, carry on, Gene. Here we have young Debbie Reynolds, cast in this film at age 19, who had no experience dancing. She needed to go through a 3-month training period, largely under Gene Kelly's supervision, to get her up to snuff. And there is a story that one day she just collapsed from the strain of it all and lack of confidence, and she was hiding under a piano crying. When a man's legs appeared below the piano that she was hiding under, and she could hear the voice say, "Why are you crying?" Well, she explained herself, and the man said, "Come here, I want you to follow me. I'm going to show you how people work hard here." Well, that man happened to be a chap named Fred Astaire, who happened to be wandering through the studio and saw what was going on. And according to Reynolds, he became a very important mentor to her and really was helpful in her growth as a dancer. Speaking of dancers, if you have Sid Charisse in your film, this is how you introduce her. But they eventually show her face, as we saw in the trailer. And this is a nod to the silent film star Louise Brooks, who was American, but best known for her role as Lulu in the German film Pandora's Box. And the haircut is what does it. That's what tells you it's Louise Brooks, who was very well known. Here is a nice ensemble shot of people that Max already referred to. On the left is the always frustrated Dexter character, played by Douglas Fowley, who has over 330 credits. And the lady on the right is Kathleen Freeman, who seemed to be everywhere in TV as I was growing up. She plays the dialect coach. We also see Jean Hagen here, who, as we know, her voice was much better than previously acknowledged in the script. But these are sort of familiar character actors. The next one is unfamiliar to most of us, but I just love this scene and I have to acknowledge this man. This is Julius Tannen, who didn't have that many screen credits. His best known ones were for Preston Sturges. But this guy humiliated himself so badly. I hope he was paid handsomely. I hope he got a good paycheck when they finished with him. This is the famous invention of dubbing, as it must have happened, which Max just referenced. And it's a clever way of showing it visually. You don't really have to do much other than hear her voice and see his lips move. Now, my notes that I am taking from the pamphlet that accompanied the MGM DVD has a slightly different description of whose actual singing voice is heard here. It's not Debbie Reynolds' voice. I think we all know her singing voice by now, but the notes say that the singer's voice that we're hearing here is actually Jean Hagen, who was dubbing herself, not just dialogue, but they claim it was in this song piece here. Just letting you know that. We can have a debate about that later. Here is one of the numerous homages or mockeries of Busby Berkeley. In the long montage sequence, we had a lot of people dancing in odd angles. This one manages to transform the opening of a megaphone into a typical Berkeley shot of ladies in a circle, I guess, kaleidoscope, something like that. This is kind of a favorite shot of mine. This is in the song You Were Meant for Me. And it's a wide shot, one of the few we have, but it shows all of those instruments of studio artifice arrayed in the background. We have a wind machine, we have a fog machine, we have all sorts of lighting effects. And it's nice that they were able to squeeze them all in one frame while Gene and Debbie were dancing for us in the foreground. This introduces a little segment I have about editing in a musical number or almost any scene. This comes right after, well, of course, this is Make 'Em Laugh, and this comes in the same shot as O'Connor running into the brick wall that we see on the right. And right after that, he does some shenanigans with his face where it kind of freezes and he loosens it up, and it's very entertaining, but they had to be fairly close to him so we could see his face doing all of its work. So they needed to cut from that to a wider shot because he's going to be doing full motion, full body antics. So one way you do that is you put motion into the cut between the two shots. And because the human eye follows movement in any situation, the eye does not notice the cut from this closer shot to this wider shot. Because here he grabs the pole and the cut occurs in the middle when he vaults over the pole. And this creates an invisible edit. We're watching O'Connor and we don't notice that the shot changes. And for those of you who want to learn a little bit more about how this is done, try watching a movie, not the whole thing, but a good 15-20 minutes with the sound off, and just watch when the edits occur. And very often you will find there is movement within the first shot and the second shot. That's how they do it. This is the song you all know. You've seen it 100 times. And one element of this is the fact that it is very hard to photograph rain. You've probably heard us refer to that in the past. And usually it's done by lighting it from an odd angle, usually the side, both sides sometimes. But here they tried another technique, which is they added something to the water itself, that being milk. Not a whole lot, but just enough so you can see the droplets coming down on the left side of the frame. And here we see it especially visible as it's bouncing off the sidewalk. So he was singing in the milky rain. Now, that's the end of my visual display for you. But I want to share something with you also from these notes in the MGM DVD. This is a story that Gene Kelly told to a biographer, and he's quoted directly here. The British, too, love singing in the rain, as Kelly and his family learned while attending Queen Elizabeth's coronation on a drizzly June day in 1953. They stood on a packed sidewalk, lost in a crowd of celebrants. Kelly recalled what occurred next. Suddenly, over the loudspeaker system, a man who had been keeping everyone informed about what was happening said, "Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you all to join Gene Kelly in Singing in the Rain." And on came my record. A few seconds later, thousands of lovely, cold, wet, shivering English men and women started to sing it. It was the biggest thrill of my life. It beat anything I'd ever known. The opening of Pal Joey, my Academy Award, you name it. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And I felt I never achieved another, and I felt if I never achieved another thing, which was the way things seemed to be going, I'd have justified my existence. Suddenly, the English could do no wrong. So that's what it meant to Gene Kelly to have this film under his belt.
It's symbolic that Singing in the Rain, but that was fantastic, Dan. Thank you so much. I knew nothing about the milk in the rain. That's incredible. That's
Oh, yeah.
I suspect the DVD folks made an error there. I'm not entirely convinced that that was Gene Hagen singing, but maybe new information has surfaced on that. But
Let's not bet anything on this, okay?
we won't bet anything. Until we can break into the archives and find the documents. We'll just
We'll do a heist at the MGM archives.
There you go. There you go. But what's powerful about Singing in the Rain is it really was Gene Kelly at his zenith, because it was his last big success. After the triumph of this film, he decided to head to England to star in and direct something of a vanity project for MGM called Invitation to the Dance, which was an episodic dance film. That's the famous one where he's dancing with Jerry, the animated mouse. And that dragged on it was unreleased for a number of years. And he never was able to recapture his stardom after leaving and going to England to make this picture. So that makes it a little bittersweet because he was.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, please continue.
He did have a straightforward acting career. And I seem to recall, I forgot to look this up, but I believe he was in the cast of the movie version of Inherit the Wind.
He was the very cynical journalist covering that trial. So yes, he did appear in things, absolutely. And he is going to reteam for the third and last time with Stanley Donen in 1955 with It's Always Fair Weather, but that was not commercially successful. Interesting picture, and he did definitely interesting films after this, but they didn't quite achieve the smash status that Singing in the Rain was able to achieve.
I have one other story about Donald O'Connor shooting Make 'Em Laugh. And this again comes from these fabled DVD liner notes, but apparently it took a day or two to film it, and he was just a physical wreck after it. I mean, he was really punishing himself, and he spent the day in bed after he finished shooting that. He comes back to the studio only to have Kelly tell him, Don, we had a problem with the footage and it all got damaged and we have to reshoot the whole thing. And so he did it. I mean, what's he going to do? But the story is that he spent 3 days in bed after the reshoot. So this is not easy work, folks.
No, it's brutal. It looks like they're having so much fun, but there's not enough money in the world to pay me to do what they're doing. It's brutal deadlines and
especially redoing the take.
Oh,
yeah, the cameraman misses the pan somehow, and
the focus is it's off the focus, or there's a jam with the film, and they got to do everything over again.
The hair in the gate, whatever it is.
The famous hair in the gate problem. No, that's a great illustration of the brutal nature of musicals production, and there are crazy things in the movie that are historically accurate. There's the scene where you see the silent production taking place at the studio. There are several movies being filmed simultaneously side by side. Right. This is right before the Make 'Em Laugh number, right? And that's accurate. That's how they were filming movies in the 1920s at the studios. These were assembly lines.
That's why you could have a director barking at the cast with a megaphone, because there was no other sound to interrupt. You couldn't screw up anybody's recording. So absolutely, days, especially at a Poverty Row studio like Monumental. Yeah.
And Peter Bogdanovich did a tribute to that as well in his film Nickelodeon. There's a scene where the camera is following Ryan O'Neal as he's going from set to set as they're all filming at the same time. And that's very, very accurate. And as I mentioned, the camera in the glass booth was also very, very accurate. And this seems like a very minor bit of praise, but it's when we have Don and Kathy, when they originally meet and he's climbing over the red car and jumps into her jalopy. By the way, that's Andy Hardy's jalopy from the Mickey Rooney films. The rear projection we see of the city, that's actually from the era. And I say that because if you look at films from the 50s that are supposedly taking place decades earlier, it always drives me crazy because you see modern traffic in the background. And here, at least, they were very, very careful about that. And we did mention that this was a 3-strip Technicolor movie. This was MGM was about 2 years. They were still doing them around 2 years later. And then they're going to start pursuing a cheaper form of shooting in color. That's not going to quite have the quality of what we saw here.
Well, one thing, all of my friends will testify to the fact that I am constantly ranting about how when Hollywood shows how movies are made, they make horrible mistakes. They cut
Yes.
corners. They don't care about accuracy. But this film is, for the most part, an exception to that. They really do get it pretty well, close to the way it was done. Pretty well. Again,
Pretty well.
100%.
I mean, there's a little, you know, when the head of the studio, what's the actual line? He says, the Warner Brothers are making a whole talking picture with this thing, The Jazz Singer. Actually, no, The Jazz Singer was a silent movie with music and some improvised dialogue. It wasn't, they didn't go into it as a talking picture, but that's a little, that's a little piddling. And the only other thing I would a little bone to contention, we see that very funny scene when Don and Lena are filming a love scene for a silent film and they hate each other. There's only one camera filming them. Logically, there would have been two. One for the American negative and one for the European negative. But I'm just being a little picky there. Other than that, they did an outstanding job of capturing that era.
Yeah, somebody took it seriously.
Absolutely. No, because as you say, they often just get the whole thing absolutely wrong. And a little bit about the acting talent here, Dan. I've always said that Hollywood, the only thing Hollywood does better than discover talent is to waste talent. And there are so many phenomenal actors here who never had this opportunity again to do what they do here. Donald O'Connor. I mean, my God, he had been in movies since he was 11, 12 years of age. He had been a child performer in vaudeville with his family. And he was wasted and making, you know, these Francis the Talking Mule movies. And this should have been the launching of a whole new career for him. And he ends up having to do just a lot of television work.
And speaking of television, the lovely and talented Jean Hagen.
There's another example of a brilliant artist who was wasted. Go ahead, Dan.
She moved into TV as the first wife of Danny Thomas on the Danny Thomas Show. She lasted 3 seasons and was replaced by Marjorie Lord. But
yeah, and she had come from Chicago. She graduated from Northwestern University as a drama major. She gets work on Broadway. MGM signs her about 3 years before Singing in the Rain. She appears, I think, at George Cukor's Adam's Ribs. That's one of her first films. And then Anthony Mann's Side Street also was one of her early roles. But then after this, they don't know what to do with her. And very few of her movies, although she was in Robert Aldrich's The Big Knife, it's you know, the Danny Thomas sitcom and some other films. But
also had a significant lead role in The Asphalt Jungle, which is, again, that's a movie we should do here on a talk back.
Yeah, it's a great
very
one.
Rich film. John Huston directed that, and Harold Rossum shot it. So
yeah, no, so yeah, exactly. So she was really, really talented. Sid Charisse had blossomed at MGM in the 1940s, and we have her. I mean, she had bigger parts than this because she has no dialogue here. But how can you forget her? I mean, how can you forget her? And
by the way,
yes,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No.
I want to remind us all that in the credits at the beginning is a familiar name, Rita Moreno.
Yes.
Who she's almost invisible in the film. She's got a couple of scenes where she is a friend of Lena, I believe.
Yeah.
She maybe has one line of dialogue. Now, how she got onto a full screen credit, I don't understand. Probably as some sort of deal with an agent. I don't know.
So she was in her, I mean, she was very, very young. She had made already a couple of films. I know she was already a teenager when she appeared in kind of a juvenile delinquency melodrama that Paul Henreid directed. And this was one of her early Hollywood, like the studio pictures. But she owns it from the beginning when she appears at the premiere and she's hamming it up for the paparazzi. She already establishes her. And yet another example of a brilliant talent wasted, because this was a woman who had a tremendous comedy flair like Jean Hagen, and they didn't really know what to do with her. And then you see her, Lena brings her in because she's reporting that Don is getting very friendly with Kathy, and she has that one line of dialogue.
Right.
But you remember her.
And bless her heart, Rita is stealing the show from every scene she's in the new West Side Story.
Yes.
She kind of dominates the cast of that film. More power to her. I think she's pushing 90 now. Am I right?
Yeah, she is, and she's just absolutely remarkable. Gene Kelly and Stanley Donen, the co-directors and co-choreographers of Singing in the Rain, they were coming off of the success of On the Town in 1949, but they had already been collaborating, and Donen had been working with Kelly, assisting him with dance work, not only at MGM but even on films like Cover Girl at Columbia, which we took a look at the other day. They met in Broadway when Kelly was starring in Pal Joey, and they're going to be heading west at around the same time. But it's a tense alliance, and they have one more film as directors. But then Donen wants to direct on his own, and that's what he ends up doing, of course.
Very well at that. I mean,
very well at that.
Really a very accomplished director. And I keep wanting to rewatch Movie sometime. Great.
Same here, because he also does a send-up of musicals in that, and especially the choreography of Busby Berkeley.
Right.
And so there's, we can go on and on, Dan, and I know people have probably a lot to say and share with us. We're going to open up the floor to questions and comments momentarily. Just a reminder that coming up at the beginning of April, in 2 weeks, I believe it is, I will be returning with a presentation, part 2 of Jazz and Blues on Film, which I first did for New Plaza a year ago. So there was so much great material I didn't have time for. We're going to try to get to that this time. And then we will have a talk back discussion on a jazz related film a few days later. So let's, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share the original trailer with you, or actually a trailer for that with you at this time. And technology being always a challenge for me sometimes. Let's see what I have here. Here we go. This is something to get you in the mood for the part 2 of Jazz and Blues on Film.
One, two, three, four. They took a jungle beat, brought it to Basin Street, and that's how jazz was born. And then someone played a whale all up and down the scale, and that's how jazz was born. They simply played what they liked, as long as it would fit. If it just had a beat, that was it. And when a horn gave a scream, they took it as a theme, and that's how jazz was born. Yeah.
So I hope you can join us on April 6th, or at the very least at the talkback that follows. Go ahead, Dan.
A quick question. That first clip that we stayed with on the audio, what is that from?
Oh, the Technicolor clip of Louis Armstrong. It's from a Danny Kaye comedy, A Song Is Born, which is a musical remake of Ball of Fire. Both films were directed by Howard Hawks, but this time, instead of these nerdy professor types trying to figure out American slang, they're trying to create a jazz dictionary. And so they're having to learn about jazz.
I should look for that. Sounds like
it's a difficult to track down at times, but it's got some great cameos.
Was that Gene Krupa drumming?
No, and I don't have the information. It's not Krupa. It looks like Krupa, but it's another drummer.
Okay. All right. Hey, Lori.
Hey guys, if anyone has a question, please use your reaction button to raise your hand. And right now we just have one person. So Marjorie, if you could unmute and start your video. Hey Marjorie.
Hey Marjorie.
This is just a wonderful talk, and I am so glad that you mentioned Gene Hagen and Donald O'Connor. I always wondered what happened to them. I was watching Singing in the Rain with a friend one time when we both remarked he was every bit as good a dancer as Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly, and never really gained the fame. Terrible waste. With Gene Hagen, the first time I saw Singing in the Rain, she is the one I remembered. All those fabulous dance numbers disappeared from my mind. And interestingly enough, when I was watching it once on TCM, Ben Mankiewicz said the exact same thing. So I felt very proud of myself. But
She owned it every time she was on screen. I was laughing, I was howling every time. All she has to do is show up. But
somebody then would say, Moses supposes, and I go, what? Gee, I just don't remember that. But I remembered Jean Crane, every word that she said, because she was so fabulous. So thank you for mentioning that. And once again, who knows? Maybe they just mishandled their career. I don't know.
I just think they sometimes don't know what to do with certain characters, and I think in Donald O'Connor's case, Daniel, you may know more, but I just presume it may have been a contractual thing. He was primarily under contract to Universal, and they got him loaned for MGM, and MGM didn't get to him early enough in his career to really do something with him. And
well, there's a Sing You Sinners he did when he was like 12 with Fred McMurray, Elizabeth, which is a fabulous movie.
because he was at Paramount, so he started out at Paramount, and we would have made that at
He
that
was
time.
like 12 years old. It was a real find. But yeah, it was really a shame. And also, I was wondering, I don't remember any dance number that Donald O'Connor partnered with someone like Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire did.
So he, you mean in this film or in general?
No,
'Cause
in general, I don't remember a movie where he had a dance partner like Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire always did.
I mean, we haven't seen, some of these films are not always easy to see, but I know there was a ill-advised remake of Anything Goes with Gene Kelly and Donald O'Connor. And I know Donald O'Connor is part of a big dance sequence there with a bunch of other performers. It's been so many years since I've seen it. But he was one that was very underutilized. And Jean Hagen, I think she was cursed with being not only incredibly funny, but beautiful. And studios say, well, how can you be funny if you're pretty? We don't know what to do with you, lady.
Like Lucille Ball. They didn't know what to do
Lucille
with
Ball,
her.
Rita Moreno. I
Either,
know.
yeah.
You can't possibly be funny if you're attractive.
Someone in the comments, Marjorie, typed that they think Donald O'Connor was paired with someone dancing in Call Me Madam. Is that correct, Jeff?
I haven't seen that in so many years, but it's certainly possible. It wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, thank you. I'll look into it. Thank you very much.
Also,
Thank you, Marjorie.
thank you, Marjorie. I want to remind everyone that these talkbacks are recorded and can be found on our website after today. So we do have one more person. Again, if anyone has any questions, we have a couple more questions. I feel like an auctioneer. Joshua, I'm sorry, Richard, you had your hand up for a while. Go ahead.
Okay, oops, hold on.
We can hear you.
Yes, wasn't Singing in the Rain attempted as a musical on Broadway at one point?
They did do it on Broadway.
Yeah.
I can't remember when, but yes, it was done on Broadway. But I want to say it was done within the last 20 years.
Good. Also, I was interested in your John Gilbert, that sound ruined him. Clara Bow, who also thought that sound was going to ruin her, but she made 3 movies that were fantastic.
Yes.
I have no idea what that was about.
So yeah, in kind of Clara Bow's case, I guess she had a bit of a New York twang in her voice that people found off-putting, but she did
say Brooklyn accent. I won't
Brooklyn.
say that.
Sorry, Brooklyn. And she did do some good pre-codes like Call Her Savage and so on in the early 30s. And then she
did Wings. Let's not forget she had a prominent part in Wings, the first movie to win a Best Picture Oscar.
But of course that was a silent, and it was but with the talkies came, then she started fading out her career. I think she almost took a retirement. John Gilbert's case, they put him in some pretty bad talkies. However, he did do an outstanding pre-code in 1932 called Downstairs, which was based on a story of his own where he plays a very unsavory chauffeur who's like manipulating people in a mansion, and he's very good. I mean, he had kind of a more higher pitched voice than people were expecting, but he was very, very good. It's just that the projects they put him in were not so good after when the talkies arrived.
I once heard, read Garson Kanin had written an autobiography, and he told the story that when Garbo and they had staged like one of these Studio 2 weddings, at a time, and one of the couples was supposed to be Marlena or Greta Garbo and John Gilbert, and Greta Garbo was a no-show, and in the bathroom, Mayer said something like, "Oh, why don't you just sleep with her?" And and he punched Mayer, and that's why his career went down the tube, is what Garson Kanin said. I can't.
It's possible. I mean, there was definitely some animosity between the two of them, and Mayer. I'm just reading a book on Buster Keaton. Mayer was also very great at destroying careers of people, and it's possible that could have contributed to it. And of course, Garbo came to Gilbert's rescue briefly by casting him in Queen Christina in 1933, which was an outstanding early talkie. But then Gilbert just self-destructed, sadly. So that's part of the stories that in Gesundheit, that inspired the Singing in the Rain narrative in a way.
And someone earlier mentioned the way he discovers Pepe Miller in the movie The Artist, which is also about this time period. And the movie starts with our silent screen character who's in some kind of electrical contraption saying, "I will not talk, I will not talk." And then it just, I mean, that movie alone, we should do a talk back on. It's just.
It was definitely, I think, it had Singing in the Rain in mind when they did The Artist. And none of us have identified the white elephant in the room here, the stampeding rhinoceros. The fact that Singing in the Rain, Gene Kelly's rendition of it, was used for the end credits in Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange, and Malcolm McDowell improvised singing that song during a brutal sequence in A Clockwork Orange. That was something that came out of their rehearsals. And Kubrick was very nervous, and he screened it privately for Stanley Donen, who was in England at the time. And Donen totally got it. He said, "Yep, I know what you're doing. I'm okay with this." Gene Kelly was not amused. He was he wouldn't even speak to Kubrick when they were at a function together. He was very upset, and I can understand why. But Donen understood the really dark humor of using that in an Anthony Burgess nightmarish story.
Any other questions?
Did Joshua get to ask his question? I'm sorry, Josh. I was
his hand down. Joshua, are you still there? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Joshua. Please continue.
First of all, I have an anniversary DVD of Singing in the Rain, and I watched it several times. And my wife noticed that there was a DVD that came with it that told a lot of the story of the making, and yes. And I watched that, and I was astounded at how much was there that I did not see. So again, thank you for doing what you were doing. Secondly,
thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Secondly, Donald O'Connor was in Call Me Madam. I forget who he danced with. It may have been Vera Allen, I don't remember. But he was definitely in Call Me Madam. The question I wanted to ask you was that when Singing in the Rain came out, time-wise, I know it was a different studio, but time-wise, when did Guys and Dolls come out?
So the Guys and Dolls came out 3 years later. MGM released it, but it was produced by Samuel Goldwyn's production company. So that was 3 years later.
Yeah, because that had a lot of great costuming and
oh yeah,
dancing and cinematography. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. And the DVD that Joshua mentions, this must have been, I think this was for the 50th anniversary of Singing in the Rain. And they do, on the second disc, it features the outtake. There were one of two cut numbers And that's Debbie Reynolds singing "You Are My Lucky Star." It's I can see why they cut it. It doesn't quite work, but that's interesting. It also shows the inspirations or some of the films where some of the songs were performed in the 1930s films where they used some of the music for Singing in the Rain. And I think we have one more person with another question.
Beatrice, do you want to unmute and start your video?
I'll skip the video part.
Okay.
I don't want to scare anybody.
No, we get that. I totally can relate.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say when you were discussing the career of Donald O'Connor, I wanted to mention that he was in a movie, There's No Business Like Show Business, where he was the love interest of Marilyn Monroe, which is kind of an odd pairing. You know, he's so small.
There's a
compared
lot
to-
of odd things about There's No Business Like Show Business. Yes.
Right, right. But I love the movie, but I always thought it was strange putting the two together.
Yeah, so that was actually made. So that was made at Fox, as was Call Me Madam. So there was some obviously a Fox relationship there. But yes, an unusual musical with some unusual casting choices.
Right, right. Thanks.
Thank you, Beatrice.
Suzanne, do you want to unmute and start your video?
Okay, I have a question about why the studio went with Debbie Reynolds when she was untested as far as being a dancer.
I forgot who they wanted originally, and I don't know who had lobbied, whether it was Kelly or Donnan who had lobbied for her. But she had done some stuff before this. I know she did I Love Melvin, and she clearly showed some musical ability. So where she may have been new to the dancing front, she clearly knew how to hold a tune, and she had a delightful, charming presence. And I guess they figured, well, she'll figure the dancing thing out if since they did have such a generous rehearsal schedule. I'm speculating there, but that was one risk they were willing to take. Just a theory.
All right. Well, thank you all for your questions. And Dan and Max, thank you for another wonderful talk back.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Dan.
And now I turn it over to Sean, our head of marketing.
Hi, everyone. Max, I have a couple of things for you. First
Sure.
of all, this is the funny thing about aging. Remember, someone asked about when Singing in the Rain was on Broadway, and you said it maybe 20 years ago or so.
Was it 30?
40.
Are you serious?
Well, close to
Oh my
40,
word.
1985. I can't remember who's told us this in the comments, but that's what happens, right? Things
Wow.
seem closer in the rearview mirror than they actually.
I swear there was another version they did on Broadway. I'm going to have to look this up, but I'm going to take your word for it, Sean.
Okay. And the other thing you missed at the very beginning of the program, everybody notices what you're wearing.
Yes.
And the mention was, my goodness, Max is not wearing a tie today.
Yes, this is a new trend I started a few sessions ago. A friend of mine who's a few years older than me said, you know, the tie really ages you considerably. So I thought, well, let's try no tie for a while, see what kind of response we get there.
Yeah.
But, you know, we can take a vote.
I told everyone you were taking a break because you're going to wear your ties and tails at the Oscars tonight.
There you go.
Yeah.
By the way, if anyone wants to put their guess for best picture in the chat box, we'd all be interested to see what y'all think.
Yeah.
I will not be doing it because I always guess incorrectly. And I even did it on television once and vowed never to do that.
You know, I watch the Oscars to see if it's Emmy worthy. Is that weird?
Yeah.
Well, considering well, don't get me started on how they choose movies that basically are television programs. But that's
Yeah.
another story.
I see Coda and Power of the Dog popping up here, so we'll see how we do when we get through this. But anyway, I want to close for a minute. I'm sure everyone has more things that they want to do today, but don't forget. April is Jazz Awareness Month. So we're starting off April, as Max mentioned, with his lecture on the 6th, which is Jazz and Blues on Film Part 2. And then a lot of fun on the 10th. We're going to do Young Man with a Horn. And we have Wayne Winborn, our jazz expert, the director of jazz at Rutgers University. is going to be with us as well. And then later on in the month, we're going to talk about Billy Wilder. Max is doing a quiz on Billy Wilder, and we're going to talk about the film The Apartment. So I think all of those will be absolutely fabulous. We hope to see you there. If you're watching the Oscars tonight, enjoy. And thanks so much for coming, everyone. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, everyone.